Should I just start with an I told you so? Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me book club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Lizzie Sawyer.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we are going to San Francisco, California, United States. Yes, I insist on using its full government name. Published March 14th, 2023, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers is a new series to enter the Jessie Q. Sutanto empire, because she's very quickly making one. Taking the beloved Asian Aunties formula from her Aunties series, Sutanto brings her love for her cultures, family, and photography into her new iteration. Does the book stand up to her amazing debut, or is the magic unrepeatable? So, background on this, I read this first. I read it last year because I just read everything the author writes, honestly, which is hard to do because she writes so much, as we pointed out in the last episode. But I loved this book. It was so good. And I was like, I know I want to do this for the podcast. We have read all three of the Aunties books and like a brief summary. The first one's amazing. The second one's okay. The third one's better than the second one, but still kind of okay.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I would read the first one again, but I wouldn't read the second two again.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it's at. So where we stand on the Sutanto fandom. But before we go too into it, age level adult and content warning, death of a spouse, death of a parent, suicidal ideations, language abuse, physical, verbal, emotional, and mental. It's a lot. Domestic abuse specifically, graphic violence, illicit drugs mentioned, and murder.
Murder!
I don't know why I didn't put murder on until after I finished the book. I finished the book, I was like, oh yeah, the word murderer is in the title. I really should have had that one first, but it's fine. It's good. I got it on there.
What murder? There was no murder.
I don't know what you're talking about. That dude just, I don't know, killed over. It's fine.
He had an allergic reaction. That's it. Nothing suspicious here.
None, we swear. So, to judge a book by its cover, still got that really minimal cover art style that they have for the Aunties. So all you really have is Vera on the cover, looking out the window through blinds. So that doesn't really give you much. And so I was just like, cool, we're going to have an Auntie main character. That's all I really got from the cover, which I was not wrong. She is a main character.
Dude, what if it's not Vera? What if it's her neighbor?
I don't know. The way they described her perm, that seems pretty Vera.
No, I know, but looking through the blinds is very her neighbor.
Oh, yeah. For sure. So all I know going into this, I was like, yes, we're going to get an anti-main character. God, just sounds amazing, and I love it already. But we have an anti-main character. Also, there's murder. Vera is a national treasure that should be protected at all costs, or she just needs to come live near me. Not necessarily in my house, but be a neighbor would be pretty great. Just to have the beginning set up, she owns a tea shop called Vera Wong's internationally famous tea house.
World famous tea house.
World famous tea house, thank you. And the reason they use the name Vera Wong instead of Vera Wong, who's her actual name, is because of the famous woman. They're just like, yeah, it's fine. We'll just use her name. And their son's like, what about copyright? And they're like, nah, it's fine. I do kind of love that right there. But she owns this tea house and it is not doing well. She has one customer a day.
No, she has a customer that comes every day. It's not even that she gets a customer a day. It's the same customer that comes every day.
And he only comes for a very limited amount of time because he watches his sick wife. And so she goes all out for him, making him all sorts of types of teas and stuff and being experimental and this, that, and the other thing. But that's all she got.
And the tea house is run down and a lot of her ingredients are expired.
And it's dirty and not doing great.
Yeah, but in her defense, her husband has died and her son has too much he has to do to spend any time with his mother because, he has important lawyer things to do. I don't like the son.
Really? I just think he's a normal person.
No, he doesn't hear from her for 3 days, and it's one of her friends that finds out that she needs help to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
My guy, my dude, your mom went from texting you every day to not all of a sudden.
He did when she first did that. He did freak out.
Still.
Because she was like, "You're not texting me." And she's like, "Oh my goodness, Tilly, text me first." And then she's like, "Oh, I'm so busy with all my friends." But no, for the most part, from what I get, they had a complicated relationship growing up, and now he's an adult, and he's like, "I would rather not handle this and figure whatever this is at." So it's just a complicated relationship. And she talks about it from the child's perspective with Medi in the Auntie series, where it's just this complicated relationship where it's like you love them because they're family, but they're also kind of not always the most healthy relationships. So I don't know. Sometimes you have a childhood that's complicated and then you're an adult. And I'm glad they make up by the end.
I think what's actually getting under my skin is the way that Vera put her whole life into this tea shop. And through the whole book, the son's like, this tea shop's awful. I hate it. You should close it. I get it. Your mom's annoying. And I get she texts you every day. And I get that she gives you advice that you don't want. But she's put her whole life into this tea house.
Yeah, he is rude about that for sure. Yeah, our first example of their communication is Vera texting him that this girl liked 2 of his Instagram posts and he needs to ask her out because she is familiar and she has like FBI'd this girl and looked at all her posts. And it's just like, whew, okay, good morning.
So yes, I get it. However, my guy.
Yeah, he's not great about the tea house because it really does mean so much to her. And the problem is he's not wrong. It's just a financial suck at this point. She points out that she's losing money constantly. She does not know how long she can keep this tea house open. So I'm glad that new friends are able to actually help her and make it so much better. And then that they're able to meld their relationship by the end of it. Because he did go too far in the other direction. But I am glad that we'll see how they are next book. I'm hoping that they kept their relationship up. But when she's not your mom, it's not as bad. Oh my goodness. Like I said, she's pretty great. I'm pretty fond of her. But that's the setup, is she has this tea house and it's not doing great financially and she doesn't have a good relationship with her son. And it's just all this stuff. And by the way, there's a cafe where people drink coffee and she just does not understand. That comes up a ton. Because people will come into her tea house, for example. Oh no, it wasn't even at her tea house. There's a detective, which weirdly enough, there were 2 detectives introduced, but we only act like one of them's on the case after that point. But detective's walking to her desk and Vera sees her and she takes her coffee that's almost completely full and throws it away because she's like, "No, you don't need coffee, you need tea." And she's like, "I got 1 sip of that and that costs $7." Oh my goodness. So her and the coffee shop is a whole thing. I kind of love it so much. But one day, she wakes up at 4:30, does the same thing every day. I do kind of love how they use the Vera should have been a rooster and talks about the Chinese zodiac. And we get a bunch of people's Chinese zodiac and it's really fun and I love it.
She's the same zodiac sign that I am.
Yeah, she's you.
Yeah.
You are both pigs.
I don't wake up at 4:30 in the morning.
Well, duh, because she was supposed to be born a rooster. Oh my gosh. But goes down to her tea shop and there's a dead body. And that's kind of crazy, if we're being honest here. Calls the police.
You know, she's having a normal day. She's lonely. She's had her 1 customer. She closed early. She went to bed. Wakes up the next morning at the normal time, going through routine, goes downstairs. Well, that's different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't faze her at all.
No, she is excited, which granted, given her background here, and she's being stiff up her lip about it, but later on she admits it to herself, she's lonely.
She's very lonely.
She's a very lonely woman who feels like all meaning in her life has been taken. And so this is her chance, basically. She's so excited about this.
She does it just like they do on TV and is so upset that the cops don't do what they do on TV.
She draws an outline of the body in Sharpie to get ready for this.
And it doesn't go away. It's there for most of the book.
She's so excited. And so the police come and she's expecting it to be like CSI and facts. Police officers and especially prosecution lawyers hate the CSI effect where people believe what they do on TV, which is completely fictional, can be done in real life. So she has all these expectations and they're like, "Ma'am, this is a Wendy's.
Ma'am, this is a Wendy's.
She not only did the outline, cleaned up a little bit, by the way. Come to find out, I don't know what her original plan was here, but she took a flash drive from the deceased hand and kept it. And then she's like, oh, well, the police aren't useful, so I'm not gonna give it to them. But I'm hard-pressed to believe that she was gonna give it to them to begin with.
She wanted something to do.
I don't know. I don't believe you there, Vera. I think that's a convenient excuse for why you say you didn't do it, but Also, she has theories. And my favorite one is that he came to the store, saw that it was closed, broke in, and had tea rage because they couldn't get her tea fast enough. And it caused a heart attack.
See, I like the died from radiation poisoning.
Oh, yes, radiation poisoning is pretty good.
Because it definitely couldn't have been acid, because that would have been too messy.
All of it. Pretty great. She also is like, hey, I bet he does drugs. And the cops are like, how do you know that? And you find out, she also found his drugs. But she's like, I just get a vibe. You young people get vibes.
Yeah, because she didn't take the drugs. She only took the flash drive. She left the drugs for the cops to find.
I love that she goes out of her way to keep up with lingo.
Yes.
Half the time she'll get it, and then half the time she'll be like, I'm confused. It's so great. But yeah, that's the vibe.
Yeah, like the podcatch, which is not a rash.
The podcatch. You know about TikTok, but you don't know what podcasts are? Yes, I believe it. I thoroughly believe this person exists. Anyway, the police don't even think it's murder.
No, but they weirdly keep the case open.
Yeah, which makes me feel like, I don't know, you're right. They take the body, they're like, we don't know what's going on here, but there's no obvious signs of being shot or stabbed or hit.
It's even still open even after his wife has him cremated.
Yeah.
Normally by then it's closed.
Yeah, especially if they ruled the death an accident. But anyway, like I said, we start with 2 officers. I went back and double checked, even though I wrote them down, to be like, I'm not crazy here. We have a Asian police officer with the last name Ha. And then we have Selena Gray, who is the black police officer. And then from then on out, all we get is Officer Gray. What happened to her partner? Did he, move? Did he retire? You should still have a partner. It's fine. But I just noticed that. I was like, that's interesting. So Vera decides to keep an eye out. First of all, she's going to be a detective because these police are incompetent. She's just decided facts. She decides to put an obituary out that specifically names the tea shop as the place he died. We don't even know if the family's been informed, and she's like, obituary. And it comes out immediately in the paper because the next couple of days, people just start showing up, and she's like, ha ha ha, the culprit always returns to the scene.
And she gets to know all of them and refers to all of them as her suspects for the entire book.
And to their face.
And they just have to
deal with it.
Go along with it, yeah.
To the point where she says it so much, they're also suspicious of each other.
Only mildly.
It's pretty great because they all like each other. Even Vera. Vera's like, I like all of you. I hope you didn't kill him. But just in case, I'll keep you on my suspect list.
And she says that to their face, too.
100% honest. So the first person we get with this is a man called Riki, who seems to have a connection to Marshall / hates Marshall, and Marshall owes him money for some unspecified reason. He seems a little sus there. And there's a couple of them that think they might have done it, actually, and he's one of the ones that thinks he might have killed him.
Honestly, but when you get to what it actually is, you're kind of like, no, nobody, no.
Even Vera's like, honey, I wish you had told me because I could have told you no.
No, baby.
So he goes there. He's freaking out a little bit. He's worried. And he pretends that he's a reporter.
From BuzzFeed.
He's about to say where he's from. And she's like, from the BuzzFeed?
And he's like, yeah, from the BuzzFeed.
Absolutely correct. You got that 100% right. So Vera makes him take pictures of her and stuff and all this other. It's so great. But he gets her to talk about the murder. And then as he's leaving, he literally runs into this woman named Sana. She comes in and she's like, I have to think of a cover. And Vera mentions, oh, that was a reporter from BuzzFeed, so she can't be a reporter also. So she decides instead that she has a true crime podcast.
I think that's a decent cover. She plays it really weak, though.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bad. All of them. Here's the thing. A couple of times it comes up, what's the name of your podcast? Because she acts like she has an established podcast. I think she should have played it like she was going to start one.
Poor kid just wants her stuff back.
That too. But she could have played it a little different, but she's not thinking very far ahead. That's not the type of person she is, which is just facts. She is a frustrated artist who has a successful author mother.
And her mother's I don't like her. Writer's block is real? So is art block. What world are you living in?
Yeah, so she is also an Asian mom. And she thinks it's really great that she's open to the fact that her daughter's an artist. But really, it's just the case of being the exact same thing, but from the opposite side.
Asian parents tend to push their kids into being like lawyers,
engineers, doctors,
and stuff like that. And she's doing the same thing, but from a creative standpoint. You're going to be an artist.
Well, and you're going to be a successful artist is even more the issue.
Yeah.
And like you said, she doesn't believe in writer's block. She has a publishing schedule like our author friend here. And she publishes like 4 books a year.
I could not imagine.
I can't with that publishing schedule, but that's beside the point. We have talked that to death.
I don't have the attention span for that publishing schedule.
And she makes a full living as an author by publishing so much. And apparently one of them became a movie, so that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. Well, it depends on how the movie's doing.
But yeah, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing as you need to be a successful What's burnout? You don't have burnout. You just need to keep working harder. Exact same thing. What's burnout? There is no burnout. You just need to keep working harder. And so she views herself as enlightened because it's about art instead of about a STEM field when it's the exact same thing.
And honestly, it puts this wedge between Sana and her cousins because her cousins are being forced to do doctor, lawyer, engineer stuff. So they think that she's lucky. And she's over here like, I can't do anything.
Nope. The thing you have to give her mom, though, is her mom's funding her entire lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that's pretty great. And Sonny even points out, wow, I am being kind of a privileged child. But yeah, so that's Sana's cover. And I love that Vera, she's of 2 minds. They're either telling the truth or they're liars and they're the murderer. And I kind of love it. So Sana leaves her number with Vera.
So does Ricky, or Riki.
Yeah.
However you say his name. I listened to the book. I should know this. I don't. It's close enough to Ricky that I just kind of
mentally go there, yeah.
Yeah.
So the third person that she runs into, I don't know, Julia is Marshall's wife, and they have a 2-year-old girl together, and it's bad.
It's that classic story of slowly disconnecting someone from all of their loved ones and connections until all they have is you, and then
beating them down into submission.
Yeah.
Because he does, and it's very painful.
Which she comes to realize.
And she does, but it's painful in the beginning.
Yeah, it's bad.
Because she believes she deserves all this because he's made her believe that. And it's just, oof.
Her first chapter, she starts with, I don't know what to have for lunch today because I always just make what Marshall wants. I don't even know what my favorite food is anymore.
Yeah.
Which is so depressing.
Yeah, and it starts out sus, where you're like, okay, that's a little weird. But it breaks into abusive real fast when you find out some other stuff that he does. And you're like, oh, yikes. That's terrible. He's a horrible person.
He's a horrible person.
That's the first time we really get that into it. So that's 3 suspects, and she's really excited about it. And she keeps talking about all this tea that she's giving people and making people, and stop giving it away for free. You need money, Vera.
She's got savings. She has enough savings to keep the lights on for
now
at least a few months. You know, it's fine.
And it goes like in between her being like, oh, I must give them stuff for free. And maybe if I give this to the police officers, the whole police office will want my orders. And then like these delusions of grandeur, honestly, is awe-inspiring. Oh, and by the way, this is the point where she calls Tilly and she's like, hypothetically speaking.
If I had a flash drive, how would I unlock it? And he's like, you, what?
Why do you have a flash drive?
And she's like, this flash drive off this dead body. And he's like, excuse me? Dead body? What is happening? And she's like, oh yeah, there's this dead body. And he's like, why didn't you tell me about the dead body? And she's like, it doesn't matter. So flash drive. And he's like, you didn't plug it into your computer, did you? And she looks at the flash drive plugged into her computer, asking for a password. And she's like, no, this is a hypothetical flash drive. And I'm not that dumb.
As she unplugs. But I cannot imagine the heart attack this poor man has. He's at work. His mom calls and he's like, okay, I'll pick up. Expecting to be like, Tilly, why haven't you found wife yet? Which I bet is a normal conversation for them. But goes, hypothetically, if I stole evidence from a crime scene, how would I unlock it? And he's like, are you kidding me right now?
It's like, what?
Mother, I have a legal obligation here. Oh my gosh.
Sis, your mother. No, you don't.
Imagine that. He just has the worst job for that conversation to happen. Anyway, so she has this flash drive and she doesn't know what to do with it, but she's gonna figure it out. So she takes a minute to drop off tea and stuff at Alex, who is her customer, Alex's house. Hey, you should drink this. You should pick it up. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it here. She leaves a note and it's like, this is for Alex. If you are not Alex, please do not pick it up. She drops that off, coming back, and then she almost has a heart attack and then the chapter ends. Come to find out, Marshall has a twin brother.
Poor kid.
Poor Vera. That must have startled her so bad. But yes, poor kid. You find out Marshall sucked from the beginning of time, and Marshall was the golden child on top of it. Oliver's a scapegoat because... and this is so stupid and I hate it. Oliver's favorite treat growing up was shaved ice, and his mom went to make him some and then slipped on the ice and died.
She slammed her head into the counter. Which, that's not the only reason, but that's where the scapegoat kind of started, because Marshall, being the golden boy but being totally rotten to the core, has decided that, well, now that Mom is gone and Oliver is no longer the chosen one because Mom's gone, I can be the chosen one. So anything I do wrong, I can blame on him.
The problem is the dad believes it immediately, anything Marshall says. And it's just a whole thing. So it's a horrible family situation Oliver got out of there. And it gets complicated because he and Julia were besties and he had a crush on her. But then Julia started dating Marshall and they got married like almost immediately out of high school, which is always concerning.
She dropped what college she was going to and followed Marshall at his. And then they both dropped out of college and then immediately got married, which is still concerning.
Did he drop out of college? Because I know he convinced her to drop out of college. She was going for photography and he was like, well, why pay that much for a hobby? And she's like, okay. And then she only did it as a hobby and he was like, it's too expensive, and then eventually whittled her down to never do photography ever again.
Yes, but the way he talked about it and the way he was making his money through his scams made it feel like he decided college wasn't doing anything for him and so dropped out, which is part of the reason why I think he made her drop out, because he wasn't in college anymore and it's too much money, so you should also drop out kind of a vibe.
I don't know.
Because she already wasn't going to her dream college to study photography at that point. But it never says one way or the other whether or not he graduated, so maybe he did.
And the only reason I think he did is because the father still has this idealized vision of him, so if they didn't, he lied about it.
Yeah.
Because he is still this golden child, and so part of that would be getting a degree and then whatever. But there are plenty of people that went to college and got some form of business degree, but still fell for every crypto, NFT, Dogecoin thing that came along. Because finance bros. But that's beside the point. Yeah, not great.
Not great.
Shifting gears, though, back to Vera, I love how several of the narrators, because there are, 5 narrators in this book?
I was surprising the more narrators that dropped. I was like, whoa, this is a lot of people, but it's actually easy to keep up with.
Yeah.
But it did start out being like, yo, how many narrators are there?
How many suspects? There's so many. So Vera and her 4 suspects.
Am I going to be able to keep track of what's happening? Yes, you are.
And several of them specifically say that Vera was sitting there like the Queen of England.
Yes.
I love that most of the people thought that. So Oliver has tea with Vera and finds out he's honest about hating his brother, because Oliver's like, hey, no, it's fine, I hate my brother. And Vera's like, oh, familial bonds, so that's important, but also he could be the murderer. So she does this double thing where she informs him about her investigation. She's like, don't worry, I'll catch the murderer. Especially if it's you. But I'll catch the murderer. And so Oliver shares that the police think that he died from an allergic reaction. And he has a very specific allergy to bird dander. You can be allergic to anything, but that sucks. Like, how did you do that? What did you come in contact with? Apparently a goose down feather.
Oliver's really lucky that he doesn't also have it.
Yeah.
Especially since the identical twins are from the same egg, so it's literally the same genes duplicated. It splits.
True, but there's only 65% chance that both twins will have an allergy, apparently.
Huh, interesting. That's still really high.
And the correlation between both having asthma is 20%, which I think is more shocking because that has more to do with how your body's formed versus the other, which is what you come in contact with.
Interesting.
Versus fraternal twins that only have 7%.
Which makes sense, because it's 2 eggs versus the 1.
Anyway, that rabbit hole beside. So yeah, bird dander, and apparently he had a bunch of other allergies, but the bird dander is the important one because that's the one he died from.
Yeah, but we don't know that till later. Oliver says that Marshall is allergic to a few things. That kind of glosses over.
They're all food allergies except for the bird dander. I remember that.
Yeah, so it just kind of glosses over, yeah, it could have been an allergic reaction, and Vera's like, yeah, his fingers did look really swollen, like sausages.
Yeah, and so they still need to do the autopsy and the toxicology report and all that.
Yeah.
So next day, she just calls Riki ridiculously early in the morning because she wakes up at 4:30.
She waits till like 7:30.
That's still ridiculously early in the morning. The fact that he picked up is a miracle.
It's almost a normal time. If she'd given him like 30 more minutes.
He's a programmer. He does not wake up in the morning.
Yeah, me neither.
Although, fun fact, for my most recent paper, I did learn that circadian rhythms, so circadian rhythms change throughout your lifetime. Teenagers have a later circadian rhythm. That's why they stay up later and wake up later, is because their circadian rhythm is telling them to do so. And so apparently one of the shifts at around the age of 60 is it gets really early and the bedtime becomes 7 or 8 and they wake up between 3 and 4 in the morning and they're like, I'm awake. It's perfect. It's because their body, that's the circadian rhythm for them. And so it works out. So it makes sense why elderly people wake up ridiculously early because their body is telling them to wake up ridiculously early. So another reason where it's like, Vera, calm down, but calls him like, hey, your article isn't out yet. And you need to come have breakfast with me so you can take photos for the article. And so he's like, oh crap. Okay. Well, my parents always told me never to show up empty-handed. So he stops by the French pastry place next door just to find out that Vera hates her. Winifred, the owner of the next place.
Because it's not a French pastry place. She's making Chinese pastries and giving them French names.
And so he's like, I'm sorry. It's just so great.
She's like, but we're not going to waste the food, so we're going to eat it.
But she makes sure he knows all the normal names for them. She doesn't tell him the Chinese names. She tells him the English translations of the Chinese names, but it's pretty great. He was just trying to be so polite, and she was like, you have walked straight into my grudge. The only thing worse is if he would have brought her coffee. That's the worst thing he could have done.
Yes.
And he doesn't even know it. Oh my goodness. But it's okay. It turns out she also invited Sana, and she thinks they're both suspects, but she ships it.
And then she's also invited Oliver because Oliver has a car.
And that scene is so funny because she walks out and she sees a BMW and she starts walking toward it and she's like, haha, Winifred, look, I'm going to be riding in a BMW. And she walks up to it and it's locked. And Oliver's like, what are you doing? And unlocks his car, which is right next door, and it's like a beat up car.
Isn't it like a Volvo?
I think so, but it's like beat up or whatever. She has to hold her pride. So she's like, okay, we're going to Marshall's place, and has the address. And they're all shocked that she has his address, but actually it's really easy to look up where someone lives. If they own the house.
Yeah, but she didn't look it up. She went through his wallet.
True. But I'm just saying, if they were real reporters, they would would have known. Reporters use it all the time.
But Oliver's like, absolutely not. I am not going to go see my dead brother's wife, who I had a crush on, who I haven't talked to in years. That's no.
Yeah, and she's like, too bad.
And Vera's like, well, I'll just call an Uber, and it's going to cost me, sigh, $25.
So much money. But I will do this to not bother you. He's like, oh, dang it, I had Asian parents.
I mean, he calls first. He's like, hey, I want to make sure you're okay. Can we come over?
Which is very nice. I'm glad he does it.
And she says yes.
But yeah, no, it's really easy. Property taxes are publicly listed, and so it's a really fast Google search to find where anyone lives that owns property. There's a way to go around other stuff, but it was just like, guys, it's not that hard. Sorry to burst people's bubble, but it's really easy to find where someone lives. So Vera immediately takes care of the situation. She charms little Emma, who up to this point has been proven to be extremely shy.
Very clingy,
and not great with other people. And you come to find out it's because her dad was terrible and her mom is an anxious mess. So, of course, she feels anxious all the time.
Yeah, there's only so much a kid's going to be able to do when every time they do anything, their dad makes some snide comment and her mom's jittery and doesn't have the brain space because of the nerves to be able to do much.
No, she's constantly on edge, and kids pick that up. I researched it. Kids, like babies, can pick up the vibes of how you're feeling pretty early on. You'd be shocked. Let me double check. But my memory is telling me that babies can pick up depression at 6 months, that their mother is depressed at 6 months.
Wonder if that has to do with the hormones in the breast milk, or partially from just being held so close, so being so close to the emotions.
It's facial expressions, vocal tension, and body odor.
Huh.
But of course, when you're pregnant, they can also feel your emotional states as well. So kids are very, very perceptive about how their parents are feeling, which makes sense evolutionary. And so, yeah, because she's perfectly normal when it's just Emma and her mom, which makes sense because the mom is relaxed when she's just her and Emma. And so it's a whole thing. And it's just, ugh. But immediately Vera walks in. She's like, I need a sous chef, and convinces Emma to help her cook.
And Emma's like, all right, cool. Here we go. We're going to go make food. Yeah, this is my new grandma.
Yes. Wow, babies can show anxiety. They can have strong feelings of sadness, anger, stress, and anxiety themselves from as early as 3 to 5 months of age.
Huh.
Most likely, picked up from the parents who are also experiencing those feelings. So that's kind of crazy that Vera and her just bond immediately. But I can imagine it. Vera has such a confident, self-assured aura. I could see it rubbing off immediately. I feel like it rubbed off against me.
Yeah, I could also see Vera just immediately coming off as safe.
Yeah, and she has done it herself. She has been a mom.
Yeah.
So that also helps. But completely shocking for Julia, because there's a scene of her earlier with the police, and she has mom guilt where she feels embarrassed about her kid doing stuff, but at the same time she feels bad for feeling embarrassed at the same time. And so it's just like this constant cycle of mom guilt, which feeds into her anxiety even more. There's a whole thing that I'm so glad Vera helped her with. So now Vera's in their lives, and she's just like, I am going to keep running across your path as we figure out which one of you did it. Because she even goes like, one of you in this room.
And they all have a little baby meltdown.
Yeah, and she's like, I want everyone's alibi.
Everybody gives it except for Sana, who's like, you don't need to know. And Vera writes it down. And she's like, don't write that down. And she's like, but the lack of an alibi is still evidence.
That's when the police arrive, aka Officer Gray. And Vera tries to overhear them, and she fails at it, and then she gets caught. It's a whole thing. But she just announces, hey, he died from bird dander, and it isn't foul play. And that feels like a pun opportunity. He died from bird dander. It is foul play.
Yes. I love that she immediately interprets that as has died from duck.
Yes. She's like, a duck has killed him.
Which leads to this funny incident with the T at the police station being like, but there are no ducks. And Officer Gray having to be like, no.
First of all, she's like, there's no ducks in San Francisco. And then the officer is like, well, bird dander's not just from ducks, from a pigeon. And then Vera and Sonia's like, oh, He died from a pigeon? He could have died anywhere. Which ends up being a clue. Because she's like, wait a second, there are pigeons everywhere. He must have eaten it. I'm so proud of her for that. She took a misinterpretation and flipped it right around to getting what she needed.
They tell her that the bird dander was found in his stomach.
But still, she did good. I'm proud of her. Julia calls and is like, hey, Marshall had a secret apartment. Can you go look through it? I don't want to know. And he's like, fair enough, I'll go. He goes, and they're expecting a whole bunch of list of other things, but they find art pieces.
Yeah, like boxes upon boxes of art.
And fine art, not just random stuff you would buy from a tourist place or whatever. Really, really nice art. But not just one type of art either. It's not a bunch of paintings. It's paintings and sculptures and this, that, and the other thing, and all different types of mediums. It's a very, very broad, eclectic whatever right there. What is happening? I didn't know he was into art to begin with. And Julia even feels bad. She's like, maybe I should have known he was into art. No, you shouldn't have, honey. Not at all. But they're confused by this. Also, Oliver gives Emma a quiet tint, which is very cute, and I love it. Sana stops by and sees the art in Julia's house because Oliver brought some of it over to be like, I don't know what to do with this. And she gets really mad because, and you find out he stole her art. At this point, I felt like, does Marketing Sam need to give a brief overview about owning the piece versus owning the rights? Because that kind of comes up in the book and she doesn't really clarify it.
It makes you wonder if the author doesn't know or if the author's trying to show that the character doesn't know.
Because the character sort of knows. So owning the work and owning the rights are two different legal spheres. And it's really important if you try to do freelance to know what the legal mumbo jumbo is. If a company commissions you to do a statue, for example, there will be a legal document and it will say who owns the piece, most likely the company, but who owns the rights to the art, which if you're a savvy freelancer, you should always make sure that you have. And that way they have the physical thing that you have created, but you have the rights to use it. For example, you can take a picture of it and put it in your portfolio and have it on the internet, and you're the one that owns the rights about the piece. So it is different, and it's a little mind jumbly the first time you hear it, but you can own a piece of work physically, but not have the rights to make your own. For example, let's do it this way. If you owned, let's say like a museum level piece, you're really rich and you can own a art piece, like you buy it from an artist, one day you're going to donate it to a museum to get a write-off on your taxes, blah, 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 blah. Just because you own the piece of art does not mean you can then go make copies of it and sell those. You can't make prints of those pieces and sell those just because you own the piece of art. The artist still has the rights to their artwork. So that's the difference here, is she got confused and ended up selling him the rights to the NFTs. And I just want to sigh so big. Honey, no, not NFTs. They're so freaking stupid. I hate that they exist in the world. They're basically the digital rights to the work. That's my best way. They're stupid. People were like, oh, you can make a lot of money doing this. No, you can't. Most people go broke. The examples of people making money are people that are honestly doing shady stuff to begin with. So the normal person cannot make money off NFTs. You will go bankrupt just like any sort of crypto coin, because most artwork is not worth millions of dollars. Sad facts here. And it's so heartbreaking for her that she got swept into it because she was so pressured by her mother. She wasn't the best person in her art classes. That was really discouraging for her. She would have her pieces in art shows and people would just walk right past it.
To other people's art, yeah.
Yeah, and buy other people's stuff. And so this guy walks up and is like, hey, I'm going to give you money for your piece. And she's like, that's all I need. I don't know how much it's worth or anything or what's going on or what I'm signing away. But yeah, so it's just really depressing for her. And I kind of love that this isn't a random book because more people need to know, more artists need to know that you can sign away the rights to your work and you don't want to do that. And it's just so sad. When they mentioned NFT, it hit me the first time, but it really hit me the second time too, when I was just like, oh, honey, why? No, I'm so sad. But it's okay. She eventually gets it back, so it worked out. But that's why she hates Marshall. Marshall was running the scam where he would convince these poor artists that you should sign the rights away from me, and that way I get money, but then he would try to go on and sell them for even higher, and then they don't have the rights to their art, and so they don't own it. And that's what caused her painting block, artist block. Just in general, she's a painter.
Art block, yeah.
So she can't paint anymore because he owns her early pieces. And that has just so discouraged her. But that's it. That's her story. She scratched him.
Yeah, she did like a confrontation with him the night that he died. And she'd been stalking him.
Yeah, and he was like, shove up. And she just got angry. And I want to say she slapped him. But anyway, he ends up with scratches on his face. Because that's something Vera notices. He has scratches on his face and a black eye. And so that's how he got the scratches on his face. And I'm just like, Sana, why did you think that murdered him?
I never got the vibe that Sana thought that she murdered him. I think she thought that they might think that she murdered him because she had his DNA under her fingernails. So like, even though she didn't murder him, I think she thought that she might catch the blame for it.
At this point, there's a break-in at Vera's store and everyone shows up. And one person, I think Julia, was like, we should call the police. And then everyone else was like,
or not. Let's not do that.
Or not. And it was just like, guys, that's lame. I know you don't want the police involved because you don't want people to continue investigating you or whatever, but a crime took place here. That's kind of lame. You guys are bad friends. Which the twist for that got me both times. But this is the point where Riki admits, I punched Marshall, and Vera's like, honey, I could have told you you couldn't kill him in one hit. You are not that strong. Well, dang. Tell it how it is, Vera. Oh my gosh. But they do help her clean up, and he's like, well, Riki's like, while I'm here, I might as well redo the furniture. And they're like, oh, we could redo the lighting and this and the other thing. And so they start helping with tea house stuff. And Vera convinces Julia to take up photography as a job immediately.
So you skipped over the bit where Vera's like, I don't feel safe staying here in her tea house anymore. And so Julia was like, you should come stay with me.
Yes.
And so Vera's now living with Julia and basically doing the babysitting and is like, you're going to get your life back together. And Julia's like, I'm going to what? And Vera's like, you're going to get your life back together. Go do it right now. Go.
Although I do want to point out that immediately she was like, oh, I'll just go stay with my son. And Julia was the one who suddenly offered her house, because that will come up later. And it's a little unfair on Julia's part. So I just want to point that out, distinction real quick. I feel really bad for Julia, but she does have a tendency to jump to some conclusions. A little unfair conclusion, but we'll get there.
It's not good. I will give her the defense of she hasn't really used her own brain in years.
Oh, no. And she was like, oh, wait, my husband's untrustworthy. No one's trustworthy.
So she's dealing with some stuff.
But still, like, my girl, that was unfair.
I can see why.
Vera steals Oliver's manuscript. Has been sitting on the floor of his car for like 10 years, apparently. It's 10 years old. And Vera grabs it off of it, and she's going like, I'm going to take this and read this. And she's apparently been reading really slowly because she thinks it's boring.
Yeah, she stole this back at the beginning, back when she first was in his car. So she's had this for a while now.
It's just the fact she's like, I'm reading it. His pacing is just so bad. It makes me fall asleep after 3 pages. Well, dang, Vera. Tell us how you feel.
But she says it's very good.
Oh, my goodness. The wanting to be encouraging, but at the same time being so honest. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Also, I am living for Vera's commentary on Rumpelstiltskin.
Yes, absolutely.
She reads Emma a bedtime story because she's about to take a nap. And she's babysitting so Julia can start her photography career. And it just starts out and it's like, oh, there's this king. He was like, I am very greedy. And he's like, he's a very greedy man. Don't listen to him. Because he's like, hey, either turn this hay to gold or I'll kill you. He's like, this is a very bad man. And then the woman's like, oh, please, I really want to marry him. And she's just like, no, Emma, this is a stupid woman. Do not listen to her. Do not be like her. She is stupid. I just want her to comment on more classic fairy tales so bad. It was so great. But Emma falls asleep. Vera goes about snooping, finds a laptop in the garage on a tall shelf that she doesn't think Julia could get to. And it needs a key. And she's like, wait a second, I have a USB drive. And she uses the USB drive, and it's the key.
Dude, during the bit where she's in the garage and she's like looking up at the top shelf, and it's describing, top shelf where Julia can't really see, and then it's like, and then Vera spots something that shouldn't be up there, and it's silver, and I'm like, oh god, Marshall's got a gun. And then it's a laptop.
Yeah.
My first thought was gun.
I don't remember what my first thought was. Because I remembered the second time it was like, oh yeah, she finds the laptop. But I don't think it was gun. I don't know what I thought it was, though. I thought it was a piece of metal, I think. But finds shocking information in chapter. Dang it! But we go to the other guys who are cleaning up the tea house, and they clean the windows, sweep the floors, everything looks so much better, except Officer Gray shows up, and for some reason, even though she's homicide, she's here to report for the burglary, the break-in. Maybe it's because it's a murder scene and it's connected, but they've already closed the case. Anyway, that was weird. But she shows up and says that the next door neighbor reported the break-in, and so she's there to investigate, and she calls them out for not reporting it, which at this point, I would just totally go into, nope, Vera didn't want you to. I mean, they clean up, and she's like, that's suspicious.
Also, I feel like her neighbor calls the cops about the break-in, and a lot of it's already been cleaned up, and the cop comes in and is like, oh, we're gonna investigate the break-in, and I'm like,
why?
Aren't you trespassing at this point?
I mean, she's not, because she's on police duty, but I just don't understand why she gets into such a huff about it. And she's like, you guys have destroyed evidence. And it's like, you don't, I mean, I think she thinks it's a murder. I think she's thought it's been a murder for a while, and she just can't prove it. And so they can't go forward with it. But
it's still, what?
What are you doing there? Why are you on your high horse about this?
It's like, you don't even like Vera.
I really think the other three should have just gone back to, Vera didn't want to report it. This is her property. She does not have to report this as a crime.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
They weren't using their brains. They were like, oh no, it's the cops.
They were. And Officer Gray, you don't have the room to stand on here. What are you doing lecturing them about how dare you clean up after a robbery? What were you going to find here, ma'am?
Broken things.
It was just, I hated it. I just like, all of that. But they're coming back for forensics, and they're like, cool, you're not going to find anything. I don't know why she even bothered. You clearly see that they've cleaned up everything. What is forensics going to find? Forensics isn't called on every scene. It has to be the whole... Anyway, I was getting the Vera frustration of, you're going to call forensics for this, but not for the murder?
Right.
Even though it's like, I mentally know. I mentally understand. But it was just like, what are you doing, Officer Gray? Anyway, Vera found information about the art scheme that he was running. They call it a scam. It's more of a scheme because what is the definitions here? Define scam. A dishonest scheme. Never mind! Because I immediately thought of fraud, and it was like, technically what he did was not fraud, but it was dishonest, and it was a scheme, so I guess we can count it as a scam. Yeah, he took her art, and she admits it, and she's like, and now my life is terrible because of this artist block, and Vera hugs her and invites her to dinner, and she's so happy. In fact, she's like, we're gonna meet at the beach in the morning, and she's just glad. She's like, okay, I cleared you. One down. Makes her tell Julia everything. And Sana admitting to the fact that she'd been victimized by Marshall in this much different way and less pervasive, honestly, helps Julia finally comes to terms to the fact that she was also victimized by Marshall in a much, much more pervasive, ever-present, and just life-breaking way. So I'm glad for her. She deserves to come to terms with that and help, because she needs to heal, and she needs to do that to heal, and I was just very happy for her. Next is Riki, and he admits that he made a scalping bot for Marshall to help with his NFT plan, which really makes you, well, I don't know about everyone, but made me just want to, like, throw something at this Marshall dude, where it's just like, you're scamming all these people for NFTs you don't even know how to properly sell.
Nope. The poor kid, they don't have the money to send his gifted brother to school, and he's not doing great, and he's getting depressed.
And he's getting bullied, and this, that, and the other thing, and he's like, I just need money. And so he's working his job, sending as much money home as possible, working these other jobs to do this.
Having nightmares about his kid brother and having to leave him behind.
And just worried that he's going to be suicidal and just like all these things. And sees an ad for $20,000. And he's like, you know what? I have to do it. Does it. And then Marshall gives him $1,000. Or no, was it like 5,000?
It was pitiful. It was a pitiful amount.
And so Marshall was like, well, you can't tell anyone about this because what you did was illegal.
So, haha.
So you can't do anything about it. And it's just this whole thing. He's a terrible person. So he follows him into a restaurant and punches him.
Later. This is now the night of the murder.
I'm just like, my dude, he made it all the way to Vera's tea shop. I don't think it was your punch.
Not at all.
Oh, well, it's just a guilty conscience. So having cleared them, Vera now decides that they can be together. So she gives Ricky a pep talk and then makes Sana draw in the sand. I'm not an artist, but I don't know. How did you feel about that? It's like, you have artist block, so you should draw in the sand because it's not permanent, and that way you can be an artist again. Did you think that was a really good advice, or how did you feel about that?
It's good for her. I'm glad it opened up her art flow again.
I don't know. It felt contrived to me a little bit.
Why?
I don't know. I can't draw unless it's not permanent. I don't know. But like I said, I wasn't an artist, so that's why I was curious what you would think.
I mean, it's not that she can't draw unless it's not permanent. It's more that there's so much less pressure when you're doodling in the sand versus anything on canvas or paper. Because even a doodle on paper, unless you destroy the piece of paper, it's there. Whereas like sand, it's gone tomorrow.
So you thought that was a good solution to the artist block?
I think it was a decent solution, yeah, especially since it's also getting her being outside can help with art block, changing up locations, going somewhere new can help with art block.
I did like when she would do it with Emma, and she was teaching Emma that mistakes are okay, and so she was able to feel that mistakes were okay. A reminder. I thought that was really good.
Yes. It's not the end-all be-all for fix art block, but I think it was a decent solution. If it worked for her, then it worked for her.
Good. Okay, here's one thing. Julia thinks someone was in her house.
Someone was in her house. I don't like how she immediately forgets that someone was in her house.
Yeah, because here's the thing that I felt was, here's one of the two things that I felt is unfair. She finds the manuscript and she reads it. Granted, she doesn't know that this is from 10 years ago, which I think would have changed how she viewed it a little bit, but she reads the manuscript, and in the manuscript, it's about, which, by the way, Oliver, number one writing tip, don't make it that personal. Goodness, man, he writes it about two twins, and one's the golden child, and the other's a scapegoat, and oh no, the scapegoat was in love with the girl, but then the golden child started dating her and treating her terribly, so I guess I've got to murder him. Goodness.
I know the book's not real, but I'd be interested in knowing which judge gave a warrant off of the suspicion that a twin killed his brother from a manuscript that was written 10 years ago.
We'll get there. That's a whole separate thing. But right now, that's the manuscript. And so Julia reads it and decides...
Oh, Oliver's obsessed with me. Again, from a manuscript that was written 10 years ago.
Which she didn't know, but has decided that Oliver is obsessed with her and only views her as an object, and that he's come back into their lives to take over Marshall's place. Because there is a line in there about how sometimes he wishes that their daughter was his and that it was painful because, I mean, it looks a lot like him. Which at that point, I felt like it was a diary.
Yeah, and you're allowed to have your emotions. What matters is whether or not you act on them. And as a side note, I'm sorry, if someone views you as an object, there are tells.
Yeah.
She would know.
It felt like it was about his relationship with his brother. And later on, he's like, no, this was about my relationship as a brother. Sorry that I kind of wrote you as a prop. But at the same time, he didn't publish it. And like I said, it felt so personal. It felt weird to judge him like it was a real book when it just felt like a diary.
Yeah, especially since the way he's talking about it, it's like the first real big thing he's written. And the first real big thing tends to be a little more personal than stuff you write later.
It felt like such an overreaction on her part to have an excuse for her not to talk to Oliver.
Yeah, especially with like a manuscript that was clearly, whether he knew or not, clearly just a way that he was trying to write out his trauma.
Yeah, and vent and emotionally process it. It was just felt really over the top for her to be like, I hate him now. How dare he come near me and my child?
Yeah.
And what it really is she's upset that they just suddenly stopped talking.
Which is Marshall's fault.
Which is Marshall's fault. But Oliver never told her that, and Marshall never told. And Marshall fed into that, like, oh, he only wanted you to whatever, and then when you didn't, feeding her lies. But I'm just like, I know it happens in real life where people are like, wow, he was a terrible person, but still believe some of the lies they tell. But I feel like your first clue should be that Marshall told you that, and because you're like, wow, he told me all these terrible things about my parents so that I wouldn't talk to them anymore. Anyway, he's totally right about how Oliver's the worst. It's frustrating. Gray shows up. Like I said, I think this woman is convinced it's murder. She shows up to talk to Julia about how she's about to get life insurance. Ma'am, they got the policy 2 years ago. They both got the policy. From the outside, have a house and a single income. They have no credit card debt. They don't have any outstanding medical debt. There is no huge need for immediate money.
Yeah, there wouldn't really be a reason.
Why are you investigating that? People get life insurance. That's just facts. And it's more than she thought it was, but Marshall's the one who got the policy 2 years ago.
Also, why is it a cop telling her about the insurance? You know, it should be
her insurance company?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange.
This is a letter in the mail, ma'am.
Yes. And she gets the payout, and it's enough so they can actually keep the house. But up to that point, and the officer doesn't know that, but up to the point, Julia was literally like, oh, I need to sell this. And the cop shows up and is like, you have life insurance. She's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right, I do.
But I'm just like, having a child is a very normal time for life insurance to be bought. It's not suspicious to buy life insurance 2 years ago. This is the most patient murderer, gold digger.
Honestly, when she dropped the life insurance information, I was like, okay, so what if Marshall's not dead and he pretended to die to get the life insurance, but then how is he going to get the money from Julia? And I'm trying to piece that together, and I dropped it pretty quickly.
You thought more was going to come of it.
Yes, I was like, he said, I've made it. And I'm like, he's going to use the life insurance. No.
I don't know what he think he made.
It was shortly after that I clocked who the actual murderer was. I didn't know who it was and who it actually was together, but I clocked who it was in the information that we had. I had already started to suspect the first time that Sana was drawing at the beach and someone was watching her at a distance. That's about when I clocked when the murderer was. Because I was like, who would have a reason to watch Emma?
Sana draw with Emma. Yeah, so that's totally fair. But here's the thing I'm trying to remember at this point. How did he make it? What happened? What happened with Marshall? How did he suddenly come into a lot of money?
Oh, I think he was finally putting this scalping bot to use.
I have no idea. Maybe he made a big sale. I'm trying to remember. It might be at the very end.
It's never super clear how he did it. Because even when the murderer's explaining, Marshall explaining how
he scammed people for money, it's not like, oh, I just made a really big sale or something.
Well, no, because he's like, I've made it. And then he's explaining to the murderer how he's made it. And it's so vague.
I'm a terrible person and I scam people. Literally.
Yeah, and so it's never really... So it's like Faithful Findings, where he finds all this secret information about all these politicians. We never find out what the information actually is. He just has all of the secret information.
Highly recommend Fateful Findings to all our viewers at home.
I don't. Don't watch it. Do not.
It's amazing.
No.
It is the best movie.
Do not do that to yourself.
It is the best movie.
Okay, but the memes, though. So watch it for the memes.
It's the best movie.
It's the worst movie.
I am so happy it came into my life.
One of us lies and the other one tells the truth.
But yeah, I was just sitting there thinking about it. It was like, there's no, I made a big sale. Money came in from this thing. I don't know why he thought he made it.
No, he just, I've made it big.
Bye.
Have you actually used the scraper bot yet? Or are you about to and you think that like when you do that it's actually going to bring in money? Is that?
Here's part 2 of Gray being weird. Julia hides the manuscript under a pillow. right?
Yeah. And then glances at it.
Or a pillow gets knocked off or something, and Gray finds it.
And just snatches it.
She snatches it, and she's like, cool, I'm going to take it, thanks. And then first of all, I'm like, that's a really easy no. She doesn't have a warrant. You're permissively giving it to her, so that would have been a really easy no. She doesn't, but why was Officer Gray so suspicious of paper?
It's for real. Oh, I've hid this paper under a pillow. Yeah, maybe she doesn't want you to see it for normal reasons. You know, not murder.
It's a stack, and it's a printed out book, which, first of all, that is so wasteful.
Anything that you find in that manuscript, you are not going to be able to use in a court of law.
No.
A lawyer's going to laugh at your face.
That would be such a quick way for the defense to be like, this is fiction. This is not real.
It wasn't Julia's to give.
It wasn't, but it wasn't her property.
Yeah, it's still.
It's why? But then to go on, she gets a arrest warrant based on just this manuscript.
No, she just gets a search warrant. He's not under arrest.
He's not, okay. There was a search warrant based on
the manuscript. Which judge, who in their right mind goes, oh yes, this manuscript for this guy that died from an allergy. Yeah, clearly his twin probably murdered him. Absolutely. You can search his house. For sure. Also, it's already been ruled an accident.
It's already been ruled an accident. You would have to go back in and be like, this is murder.
You'd have to reopen the case.
It's a whole thing. And it just feels like Officer Gray went rogue, honestly. I'm wondering if that's what's happening here.
I feel like we didn't get any closure with Officer Gray, and I don't like that. And I didn't realize it until we started talking about it, but there's no closure there.
Whatever. This is what prompts Vera to decide that she needs to have her detective moment and she needs a dinner party to bring all the suspects together to figure out what's going on. And it doesn't go great.
Yeah, it basically ends with her getting kicked out of Julia's house.
Sana and Riki show up, and then Oliver's late, but they get started, and then Oliver shows up and is like, hey, Vera, why the heck did you give that manuscript to the police? And then Vera's like, I didn't give it to the police, and then finds out that Julia gave it to the police, but Julia's upset at him, and then Julia is mad at him and is like, you murdered him. And then he's like, no, I planted drugs on him. Okay. Apparently Oliver, who's a maintenance guy for an apartment building, found some drugs that were hidden in a toilet tank. Really noob job, drug owner, to forget your entire thing of drugs. Very commonly searched place, but okay.
Hey, man, not everybody's smart.
Yeah, but you paid money for that.
Not everybody's smart. He hid them. Not well, but he hid them.
Yeah, that's pretty much like a first place people look. So Julia's just pissed about him for the manuscript, and then Vera reveals that she broke into her own shop and trashed it, and then she talks about the flash drive and laptop, which are missing, by the way, and Riki has to come clean about the bot he made, which hurts Sana, because it ended up him being kind of part of his NFT issues, which is more fair than Julia being mad at Oliver, but Sana figures it out pretty quick that she overreacted, that Riki had his reasons, and is very mature about it very quickly. So I like Sana better. But part 2 of Julia. Vera explains that she did this because no one was taking the murder seriously. And Julia takes that fact and twists it that Vera smashed her own shop so Vera could specifically come live with her and Emma.
No, you invited her, babes.
You're the reason she's living with you. It's you. She wanted to live with her son. So she ends up kicking her out because she's convinced that Vera is some creep that's obsessed with her 2-year-old. It's a whole thing. So that really depresses her. And then she is calling Tilly, and somehow Tilly gets it in his mind that she's selling the tea shop. And he's like, great, that's awesome. That place is terrible. And that just completely depresses her.
She's just been kicked out of her friend's house. She's not going to be able to see the little girl anymore. I think Tilly actually calls her because he hasn't heard from her in a couple of days. And she says something like, it's empty. I don't know. She says something and he's just immediately like, good. You should be selling it. It's awful.
It's terrible. It's horrible. It was like, it may be your entire life, but it's awful.
And it sends her into such a depressive spiral that she doesn't get out of bed for 3 days.
And she doesn't eat, and she doesn't do anything. It's elder suicide, essentially, where they just stop taking care of themselves. They don't do anything specifically.
There's just no point anymore.
But they just don't eat. They don't drink. they just lay there in bed until their heart gives out and they pass away. It's a horrible, very depressing thing. And so Riki is the one who ends up finding, but I'm not going to be mad at the son here, because the only reason Riki found out about it is his landlord was pissed off that Riki was taking up the parking lot
with Vera's chairs.
Yeah, that he was going to redo. And so he's like, you're right.
And he'd redone half of them.
He'd redone half of them and they looked really good, and he felt proud of that. And he's like, I'm going to go give this to Vera. And so dropping him off, Winifred's like, oh, I haven't seen her in days. And then Riki's like, okay, that's bad. And then he goes to go look for her. So it's not like Riki was like, how is Vera doing? He just happened to find out about it.
He felt bad about not checking on her sooner, though.
Yes. And so I'm glad he checked on her, because goes to the hospital. She's, of course, dehydrated, malnourished, and apparently got bronchitis while she was at it.
Well, her apartment is kind of damp. They mentioned that.
Yes. So the whole crew goes there and learns, and so they start making up, and Tilly shows up and they give him a hard time for not caring about his mom. And so everyone's back together. Sana paints the place, makes a mural for Vera. Oliver redoes the electrical downstairs and in her living quarters so it won't be bad.
He also does the plumbing.
And Riki redoes the rest of the furniture. I don't think Julia does anything. She just kind of shows up and is like, hey, Oliver, what's up? And Oliver is like, Tilly has taken me pro bono, which that is very nice of Tilly. Lawyers do not have a lot of free time, period, for the cases that are paying them. So it took him pro bono, so the police backed off because, as we pointed out, they don't have anything but a freaking manuscript.
They don't have anything.
And the vague fact that he knew about the bird dander allergy.
Which, of course, he knows. He's family.
And they act like it's suspicious that he knows about the bird allergy.
He's family. He had to know growing up.
He slept next to him when his face was on the pillow. You walk in to being mad about the life insurance to Julia.
Yes, this is my brother. I don't know what he's allergic to. What?
You walk in acting all suspicious of Julia for having a life insurance policy, but you're not like, oh, you knew that he had a bird dander allergy. It's just brought up with Oliver, and I can't. This is not a police procedural, and I'm very glad of it, because I'm so annoyed. Anyway, apologizes about the manuscript. He's like, yeah, that was kind of crappy, but, you know, it wasn't really for you to read, because beside the point. And he just puts it into contents, and he says what we thought, you know, this was a personal thing for me getting over my feelings of my brother being terrible. So they both moved past it. Vera and her hospital roommate were gold. I loved it so much.
I hope I never meet that other woman in person ever.
Gladys is just a complainer. She complains about everything that happens. And then when Vera's leaving, Vera's just kind of taking it. And Vera's like, more colorful language, but she's like, you're a jerk. I hate you. You should come by my tea house. Goodbye.
I love the bit where Sana brings exotic food or something for Vera. I forget what it actually is. And the roommate's commenting on how it's unhealthy and will give you cancer or something. And Vera's like, Sana, you should bring cocaine so that we can see how she will react.
And Sana's like, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, I'm joking. Mostly.
So you should bring cocaine.
It's so unhinged. But she gets back to her tea house. She's categorizing everything. She did think that she got broken into, though, because her things were out of place. But she's like, no one's going to take me seriously. So she did break into her shop. But then she didn't involve the police. What are you doing?
Well, yeah, I think her logic is pretty sound with this because they didn't do much with the murder case, partly because she took the flash drive, but that's beside the point at this point. But she's right. They'd come in and they'd be like, all right, cool. Was anything taken? And she'd be like, well, no. And they'd be like, did the safe get broken into? Well, no.
But why did she make a bigger break-in?
It was like, just some stuff's been moved around. And only some stuff was moved around prior. You know, it just felt off. And they're going to come in and be like, this is a crazy old lady. And then they're going to leave.
But why are you going to make a bigger break-in if you're not going to involve the cops?
See, but I don't think she said she didn't want to involve the cops. I feel like everybody else was like, let's not involve the cops. And she was like, oh, everybody's taking this seriously. This is great.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, she's making celebratory tea and she goes to get bird's nest.
Bird's nest, which, from Google, The main ingredient of bird's nest tea, which is made from the dried saliva of swiftlets, small birds that live in Southeast Asia. That's what bird's nest is. Bird's nests are high in calcium, iron, potassium, and magnesium. So that's what bird's nest is. Because I was like, is that literally pieces of bird's nest? No, it's made from dried saliva of swiftlets. Bird dander.
Ew.
To be fair, there are so many things that we eat normally that are kind of gross.
I know. I try not to think about it.
But that's when she's like, my bird's nest is missing. I didn't do anything with my bird's nest.
She said something like $200 worth of bird's nest in there.
Hot dang, girl. And she does have a lot of ingredients from Indonesia. And so, or China, I don't remember at this point. But it's a whole thing. And so she realized it's gone. She's like, holy crap, that's been taken from me. Haven't I made bird nest tea recently? And then it clicks. She gave bird's nest tea to Alex before Marshall died. She's like, we're leaving. And they're like, what's going on? And then they get to the apartments and Julia's like, Oliver, why is she at your dad's place? And it's so good. I love it so much because it's one of those things you can piece together before there's enough hints. Alex talks about having a good son and a bad son. One is very familial and brings him groceries every week, and the other is just a terribleness. But he uses their Chinese names. We know them from their American names. It's so good. And there's little hints, like Oliver drops off groceries to his dad at one point, and the dad's like, go away, I never want to hear from you ever again. And it's a whole thing.
He just says, no, I can't.
Don't come back. And so there's someone dropping off groceries. And like you said, there's a man watching Emma, watching Julia, stuff like that. And so it's so good that you get to the end and you realize, holy crap, Marshall is Alex's son.
And as I said, at this point, I'd clock, I bet the dad killed Marshall. I bet he found out he was actually really bad and killed him for some reason. At this point, I'd already clocked that. I had not clocked that Alex was the dad.
Yes, because he keeps mentioning his wife that's alive. And Vera's like, Oliver, what is the name of your dad? And he's like, Alex. And you can piece it together. And I thought maybe a stepmom, and just Oliver never got along with her.
I was like, maybe the mom's not dead and the dad hid it for some reason.
That'd be really hard to hide.
That was my first thought. I don't know.
I thought stepmom. You come to find out, he told Vera that she was alive because he liked going to a place where he could pretend that she was alive. And Vera immediately gets it. She's like, if I could go to a place and I could pretend that my husband was still alive, I would probably do it too. So it's a little funny because they show up and she basically forces her way in and everyone's there. And Alex is like, Vera, go ahead and tell them I don't have the energy. And then Vera's just like, he's the murderer. And he's like, yes, let me explain.
I suddenly have the energy.
Which is good because he gives us a lot of information. Turns out he thought Marshall was the one delivering groceries every week. And totally thought Marshall was this amazing person this entire time. Until Riki shows up at the restaurant and punches him.
What starts it off, right, is Marshall leaves Julia, and Julia calls Alex and is like, he's left me. And so Alex calls Marshall and is like, yo, what's going on? And Marshall's like, I've made it big. I'm going to take you to dinner. And so he's like, okay. And shows up at the restaurant, and he's walking up, and Marshall's at the front desk thing, concierge, hostess, whatever it is. And Riki comes in and just punches him and then runs away. And so Alex is like, whoa. And Marshall's got that evil little piece of turd look on his face, but immediately shifts it back to Golden Boy as soon as he sees his father. And his dad's like, well, I don't like that you were able to shift that quickly from one to the other.
And then for some reason, Marshall just goes mask off. And he's like, yeah, I did leave my wife and kid.
It's because he got free booze at the bar for getting punched. So he's loose-lipped, and I don't think he fully masked off. I think he just got a little looser and was talking about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get all this money from all this business. And I'm sure he thinks his dad's dumb because his dad's been in the same apartment for forever. And so he's like, my dad won't understand this is a scam, but his dad definitely clocks it as a scam.
But he's straight up, he's like, yeah, I'm leaving my wife and kids. They suck. They're terrible. She's a freak. I want a fresh start or whatever. And then he's like, oh, No, but I get it by scamming people out of their money and stuff. He's like, what the heck? It's a whole thing. And it was just like, wow, you need no clients. You had a couple drinks and you're just like, here's my terrible secret.
I feel like it's probably still endorphins from being punched and then the alcohol on top of that, as well as he's probably not actually talked to his dad in forever, an actual conversation.
Yeah, I don't know. They go back to his apartment though, and he's even more terrible somehow. And Alex is like, I've created a monster. I need to take it out, and gives him the bird's nest tea. That is how he died. He stumbled out of the apartment and Alex never saw him ever again. Apparently he broke into Vera's place, and Vera thinks it's because he was trying to leave a hint to his murderer and was trying to be like the tea was poisoned. That's giving him a lot of grace. But yeah, Alex is just really upset that he's treated Oliver horribly for so long, and he insists that Oliver visits him in prison so they can talk. And so he's just gonna go turn himself in.
Oh, and Alex took the laptop because he missed Marshall a lot and was just gonna take a shirt, but then Julia almost caught him, so he just gonna grab the laptop.
Yes, and he also took the bird's nest tea because he was worried that the cops would find it and then blame Vera. And my immediate thought was, do you still have it? Because that's really expensive.
Could she have it back, please?
That was $200. Do you have it? Probably not. But yeah, that's what happened. Epilogue. Vera lives with Julia while they clean Vera's house out of junk because apparently she's a little bit of a hoarder situation.
It's that Sana talks about it a little bit. All of the memories from where they came from that they just can't bear to get rid of, but they also can't bear to unpack because it hurts.
Yes. And they also mentioned, I think Vera mentioned it at the very beginning of the book too, that she has all this stuff. So they're clearing it out to make it a better situation because that is a very good way to get bronchitis, as she has proven. So Julia's been starting to make a business of herself in photography, and it's going really well. And she can't quite make a living on it yet to live in her house, but the life insurance money comes in and helps that. And one of the first things she does with her first life insurance check is give a huge chunk of it to Ricky so he can bring his brother over to San Francisco. And so he's coming over soon. I hope he's in the second book. That would be so great.
That would be good, yes.
And Vera's so excited to spoil him. And it's going to be great. And Ricky and Sana are going through the stolen art to give the rights back to the artist. So Sana gets her art back and the other artist will get theirs back. Ricky ends up safe about making the scalping bot because the law hasn't caught up fast enough, which is true. It's facts. That's why it became a wild west of NFTs for a really good, and cyber currency. Like, it was unregulated because it takes forever to regulate something because you have to write it to be perfect and then everyone has to fight over it and then it gets voted and it's a whole thing. So it's kind of cool that he's the one taking the NFTs offline because he's the one that helped push them out there. It was just poetic there. I kind of liked that. I'm a little confused that Alex's trial is ongoing. Why didn't he just plead guilty? He probably could have gotten a plea bargain real easy.
Maybe he did, and they wanted to do a little more investigation. Maybe they didn't believe him.
Yeah, but that's investigation, not trial.
I don't know, man.
I was a little confused by that.
I didn't write the book. I don't know.
I was confused by that because he was like, visit me in jail. Like, it made it pretty obvious that I'm going to call it. So I don't understand why there is a trial. It's really easy to be like, how do you plead? Guilty. Cool, we'll go to sentencing. Maybe
she just wanted Tilly to be able to do something and so made the trial ongoing.
I don't know.
It's not real. It doesn't matter.
Matters. Oliver ends up writing a story about Vera.
An article. He's a reporter now.
Yes, and Julia took pictures of the mural, and that's really famous, and now people are showing up to her tea shop because they're really excited to try the tea and look at the mural, and they're very excited. So
I feel like famous is the wrong word and viral is the right one.
Yeah, depends how lasting it is. But she has 3 customers waiting for her as she opens, and she opens pretty early, so pretty good.
And she's immediately like, no soliciting, and they're like, no, we're customers.
We want to try the tea. And Sana apparently is into mural work now. A bunch of places are paying her now to do murals for them, which is good for her. Yay, art, successfully having a career, woo, paying bills yourself. And Vera finally realizes that what she really needed was family and people and loved ones around her. And yes, and so I like the ending. It's very sweet. She now has the loving family that she wanted so desperately, and it's pretty great. All of their lives were made better because they came into contact with one another. Happy ending. General thoughts. I love it. A side note, I complained about the word spacing in The Good, the Bad, and the Antis, and I was like, I feel like they're purposely making the font really big, the spacing's really wide, and they're having a bunch of random blank pages. And going from reading that book to reading this book can confirm, because this book is written like a normal book. The spacing is so much smaller, there's so many words on the page, and it's about the same length. And so, yeah, it makes The Good and the Bad and the Antis look a little worse by comparison. But I like this book. I think it's really good. I'm really excited that she has a sequel coming, because at first she wasn't sure. I saw on Goodreads someone's like, hey, are you going to make a sequel? And she's like, it depends on what the publisher wants. And well, apparently they want it, and I'm very excited because it's very good. Its success doesn't rely on as many plot threads as Dial A for Aunties did, because that was one thing it felt like she couldn't replicate, was all of those overlapping storylines, whereas this feels much more streamlined, and I think it's something that she could successfully do on her tighter timelines than Dial A for Aunties. So I'm excited about this series. I like it. I like Vera. We all need a Vera in our lives to help us figure out what the heck we're doing.
It's a good book. It's good. Fun read. I said many things out loud to myself.
It gives you the emotions. One question for the author. I'd be curious about her favorite tea. She knows a lot about tea, as evidenced by this book and the many, many teas that Vera makes for different reasons. And so I'd be curious what her favorite is. Is it Vera's favorite? I don't know what Vera's favorite is, but she has a tea that she drinks every day. And so I'm wondering if it's that, or if that's just like, oh, my aunt or my mom drinks that a lot, or whoever drinks that a lot. And so I made it Vera's favorite, and her favorite's like something completely different. Or if she's just like, no, I like coffee. Vera would hate me because I like coffee, but it's just facts. So I'd be curious what she'd say.
I kind of want to know who she based the characters off of, or if they're bits of herself, or both.
She's been very honest about how the aunties from the other series were based on her mom and her three aunts. They even recreate several of the covers. Every time the new cover comes out, she and her mom and her aunts remake the covers, and I just love it so much. And so I could totally see Vera being based off kind of a homogenous them, but I would be curious where the other characters came from too, and how she decided to make them the ways they were. I think having a conversation with her in general would be fun. She seems like a very fun person. I do imagine her to be kind of like Medi in that she's very personable, but maybe a little socially awkward in the way that's very charismatic. So I think having any conversation with her would be pretty fun. Rating. I would give it an adultier adult fixing everything out of 10. Vera's so good. Reading the book makes me feel so happy. In the beginning of the book, there's a quote from another author, and I don't remember which author it is at this point, but it says how it feels like it's good for the soul. And I agree with that. It just all feels so warm and comforting, and I'm just very happy to reread the book.
I give it a perfect cup of tea out of 10.
What is your perfect cup of tea?
I'm a basic white girl, and I do black tea with a little bit of honey and milk, specifically a breakfast blend.
Is good for mornings. Vera would be proud.
Nah, I do it in the evenings.
Oh, never mind. Man, it would be so cool to go to a place and they'd be like, this is the type of tea that you need. But read again, yes. I could see it becoming a comfort read just because I knew who it was and it didn't take away from the book in any way. And I still enjoyed the characters getting together and growing together and watching how all of them start in one way and they end in another. And so the fact that I could still enjoy that while knowing the ending is a pretty good sign.
I'd probably read it again. Not anytime soon, but maybe in the future. Honestly, I probably won't seek this out as a comfort read, only because the tension at the end resonates weird for me.
When everyone hates everyone?
Yeah, right when everybody's about to confront everybody else and then everybody hates everybody else. It sits weird for me. Everything else is nice and comfy and great. It's just that bit at the end.
But, have you read this book? Who makes the best tea? Please tell us. If you have any book recommendations for us, tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers with us. Join us next time. We'll be covering Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Lizzie Sawyer.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.